Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-ones in session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at drdanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our first episode of season 23, a very special guest and the How to Say No expert, Sheryl Green. And I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Sheryl, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me here, Dr. Dan. And I'm tempted to try French, but it's been about 20 years since I've actually learned that. So I'll stick with English. So yes, my name is Sheryl Green. I'm the How to Say No expert. I'm a mental health speaker and author. And the reason that I do this is because I'm a recovering people pleaser. I spent 40 plus years trying to be everything to everyone. And when I finally hit a brick wall and realized that was not the way to live my life, I set out on this boundary journey and realized that it's not just me that has this problem, it's running rampant in society. So as I was learning, I realized I was also going to teach, and wrote it's my sixth book. You Had Me at No: How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity. And now I speak and I share my knowledge and coach and work with people who really want their lives back, or to have it for the first time.
I bet you that you must have got inspired by Jerry Maguire from the title of the book. You had me at hello.
Just a little.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Sheryl, for being here today. And I know that your story will definitely inspire many listeners. We're close to 1.6 million listeners right now. So I'm sure that your story definitely is very, very common among the many out there. So when it comes to the transition, because obviously it's very difficult from being someone like a people pleaser to starting putting boundaries for yourself and letting others not to take advantage of you. So how do you implement this transition?
Great question. So first, start small. Boundary challenges, they can be with really close people in our lives, but we can also have issues setting boundaries with just about anyone. When you are new on this journey, I don't suggest, walking up to your mother-in-law and setting a boundary as your very first one. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. But you want to start small. You want to start with the easy targets. Doesn't seem like a very nice word, but the easy people in your life. At the grocery store, you've got someone bagging your groceries violently and your eggs are going to be scrambled before you get them to the kitchen. Now's the time to say something small. Hey, would you mind being more careful? You're at the massage therapist and they're using too much pressure. And I don't know about everybody else, but I have suffered through massages because I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to be, not nice and tell them they weren't doing a good job. So start with the small ones. Hey, you know what? That actually is too much pressure. Can you go a little bit lighter?
I see.
It builds the muscle. And as you build up that muscle, you get stronger, you get better at setting boundaries, and then you can tackle the family members.
So, but would you agree or not, Sheryl, that the biggest difficulty is not to set boundaries with strangers, but mostly with family? And unfortunately, family will take you for granted. So they feel that they could basically talk the way they want to you without having any repercussion to their action. So isn't that something that people have the biggest struggle in dealing with family member, because they do not want to be perceived as the black sheep in the family or being someone who's retaliating whatsoever? So how do you, after building that so-called muscle that you just mentioned, how to transition to dealing with family members?
Yeah, so family members, anybody close to us, are of course going to be the more difficult one because there's higher stakes.
Mhm.
You know, if you upset the person at the grocery store, whatever, you move on with your life in, 5 minutes. If you upset mom or cousin or aunt or whatever it may be, that could pose some challenges. So really getting clear on what it is you want, what it is you need, and what you're okay with and not okay with. And then learning to communicate that in a kind, clear, concise way. You know, you don't have to apologize for having needs. You don't have to apologize for wanting to be treated in a certain way. But you do have to be able to communicate it in a way that doesn't just basically say, screw off, I don't need you in my life. So really understanding that that communication and that, hey, empathizing with them. I understand this is how things have always been. I'm not comfortable with it moving forward. And I'm just using a generic thing here, but in the future, I would like this. In the future, I need you to not X, Y, and Z. Okay. And make it really clear what you're looking for. And realizing that boundaries aren't something you do to someone, they're actually a gift. Because when we are when we perceive that we're being mistreated, when we don't like the way that people are treating us, we're not very nice. So, you can be unpleasant and resentful and really short and nasty when you speak with people, just because you don't like boundaries that are being crossed. When you get all of this laid out, you make it clear, this is how I'd like to be treated. Then you can actually calm down and you can be yourself. So look at it as a gift. And I apologize, my dog is snoring in the background. So if you hear weird noises, that would be a chihuahua.
No.
So yeah, just realizing that it's actually a gift and it's actually going to improve your relationship when done properly.
So would you recommend for people to first start writing down their boundary breakers, if we would call them boundary breakers, where this is something that they're not going to be flexible with? And because if they are somewhat not clear about what are their boundaries and what is allowed to cross or not to, because also you cannot be so frigid. You have to be somewhat flexible, right? So to what point is something that I don't want you in my private life, and this is where I'm going to set that boundary. Or I don't want you to be able to tell me who I should date, or tell me what I should do, or what job should I get. So these are things that they have to set themselves as, I'm not going to be flexible with that. However, if I change my haircut and someone said, doesn't fit you, then okay, I'm going to let it grow and maybe change it to something more appealing. So when they set those boundary breakers, what they should start with, something simple, or should they go directly with what they feel the most impacted?
Yeah. So one, I will say, choose your battles. I think that's what we're getting at with that. So I call it rear view mirror work. Okay. And that's looking at your past, looking at experiences that you've been through, and what happened. How did you feel when it happened? And usually when you get those kind of like icky feelings, that really uncomfortable, you've identified a boundary. Okay. Like you said, somebody's like, why aren't you married yet? Why don't you have kids yet? As we mature, I don't know if your hair that really suits you, theoretically, that's going to bother us less.
Much less.
Theoretically, it would probably still piss me off, but whatever. So we really have to look at what are the super important things in our life, the boundary breakers that you suggested. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to cut a certain person out of your life. It just means that you have to kind of limit maybe what you tell them. Okay, maybe you have somebody who's always judgmental about your dating life. Maybe they don't need to hear about it. Okay. And maybe the only boundary that you set is, I'm actually not comfortable talking about that. I would appreciate if you would not broach that subject.
Okay, I see.
And that's it. And you're just reinforcing at that point. Next time oh, hey, dating anybody? You know what? I'm still not comfortable talking about that with you. So, let that go. Let's talk about something else. Kind of like a dog with a bone, you kind of have to deflect them and make them think about something else.
Yes.
So, but yeah, choose your battles. I mean, family is family. And if you want them in your life, it's not going to end well if you're nitpicking every single little thing. No, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that either. I don't want to talk about that. Okay, let's just sit here and
Look at
stare at the weather, so yeah, be choosy, be careful on what you do. But those things that are important to you, it is important to stand up for yourself.
But overall, when it comes to people establishing those boundaries, don't we deliberately put ourselves, Sheryl, in kind of asking people for advice? And then when we do not want to hear their advice is when we start putting those boundaries based on their answers. So do you feel that this is somewhat correlated with, yes, everyone needs to be able to build connection with others, but then when we don't like what we hear is when we say, oh, I feel shocked or I feel kind of insulted. So where is the distinction between the boundaries that we set before we ask for advice versus those that we set after we heard that advice?
Interesting. So I would say with that, sometimes we're not looking for advice, but that is not communicated well. So there was a video a long time ago called "It's Not About the Nail." It
Yes,
was going around. You saw that? And I just think, in case somebody hasn't seen it, the woman is complaining to her husband, like she has this really terrible headache, and he's making all these suggestions, and she goes, and they finally show she's got a nail in her head, and she goes, I just need you to understand me. And he goes, I'm so sorry you're going through that. And she's like, thank you. And I think we get into that situation a lot where whether it's men and women or however that happens, we get into a situation of really, we either just want to share something. Sometimes we just want to commiserate. Sometimes we just want someone to say, I'm so sorry you're going through that, instead of, have you tried this, and this? And when we communicate that properly, when we go to someone and say, you know what, I'm about to tell you something, please don't try and solve it. Please don't give me suggestions or advice. I really just need to share this, and I need someone to hear me and to witness me. I think that would clear up a lot of issues. So just going in, like, here are my expectations. And truthfully, that's what boundaries are. Setting up front expectations of, this is what I want and need from you. Please don't go beyond it.
But are people comfortable enough to be able to openly discuss about what they are expecting out of a conversation? Because then, isn't that a bit somewhat like, okay, we're asking for advice, but this is what we only want to hear, or this is what we establish ourselves in advance, that don't even try to cross that line or this line. So the other person will say, okay, so it's all about you then. So my point of view is worthless, kind of thing. Because then if I could not openly communicate what I truly think about what the issue you're dealing with, then what's the point of coming to me and asking me questions?
So, it's an interesting, I've never discussed that, but I would say you may be ready to give that advice, but the other person may not be ready to hear it.
Okay.
So can you look at it as in, it's all about you right now? Yes. Sometimes it is, if you're going to a friend or a family member and you're just like, I need to vent. I have two friends that I text and say, can I call and bitch for 5 minutes?
Okay.
And they know at the end of 5 minutes, I'm done. They know I don't need any suggestions. I'm not looking for help. And they do the same thing to me.
Okay.
So where that boundary would come in is if you have someone that is constantly calling you and constantly complaining and going through the same stuff, and they're never there when you have something to discuss or when you have something to vent about, that's the problem.
Okay.
That's the problem, that unequal, give and no take, or take and no give.
So there should be some form of reciprocity where they
Yes.
both contribute equally to listening to the other one complain, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
When you put it that way, it doesn't sound good.
Well, we have
No.
to blunt, right, Sheryl?
Just to vent.
Right.
If you keep going through the same thing, obviously there's an issue, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, those who actually are more seeking validation from family members and etc., are they the ones suffering more or the most from establishing those boundaries?
Yes, I would say needing that external validation does definitely contribute to it. I was raised in an environment where my value was based off of what I did for others.
Okay.
So it wasn't like you have value just because you're you. It was you have value because you're cleaning off the table, because you're taking care of this person when they're sick, because it was kind of transactional.
Mhm.
So yeah, that for sure has led me down the path that I'm on. And I went into animal rescue for 14 years.
Wow.
It was a healthier way to express my codependency. And I realize that now. Did that take away anything from the animals that I helped during that time? Absolutely not. But I got value. I got self-worth from what I did for others. And I found a semi-healthy way for a little period of time to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of problems, whether it's boundaries or any other issue that you're having, a lot stems from you're looking for that external validation. You're struggling with your self-worth. My first book, I actually said all the world's problems are because of the lack of self-worth. Wars, like everything. Grand statement, yes, but I truly believe that if we believed in ourselves more, we wouldn't have the challenges we have.
I see. And now when it comes to those who are dealing with relationship that one has a narcissistic personality and the other one is an empath, I mean, to a certain point, those who are dealing in those situations or those type of like a relationship, they will never be able to establish any boundaries because a narcissistic person doesn't understand what boundaries are. So is there a way for you to be able to say, well, maybe it's time to leave, maybe it's time to start looking for something else, because eventually it will just go downhill for them. So
Yes.
if you're dealing with those kind of situation, what's the best exit?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're going to have people that have they find it difficult to accept your boundaries and this new version, but eventually they do, because they love you and they care about you and they want you in their life. But then of course you're going to have those people that no matter what you do, and look, setting boundaries isn't a way of controlling other people. We have no control over others. We only can decide whether or not we're going to allow the treatment to continue. So yeah, at some point you may have to say, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't like how I'm being treated, and this person is no longer going to be in my life. And sometimes they self-select out, and that makes it a little bit easier. But sometimes you are going to have to make that decision. And sometimes it's not entirely, you do have a parent or something that maybe, I'm not saying you shouldn't get rid of your parents if the treatment is that terrible, but you also shouldn't run towards it. If you want someone in your life, you may have to limit the access they have to you. Okay. And it's not just a stay away from me completely, but this is when I can handle you. Don't say that, but this is how we can continue our relationship and nothing beyond this. In terms of actually, leaving, I would be honest, unless there's danger. And I'm very clear with that in my book. If there's any kind of abuse, like, you need a professional to be coaching you through this. You need possibly law enforcement. But if there's no danger there, it's just a matter of being honest and saying, you know what, this relationship no longer works. It no longer works for me. I'm not getting what I need, and clearly you're not getting what you need either. So at this point, we need to part ways, and being very clear, and not the I think and probably and possibly and all that stuff. Be very clear. This is what will be.
I see. But now here's the biggest caveat is that a lot of those people who want to establish boundaries with family members, the family members will tend to kind of put them through a guilt trip to say, oh my God, you know, you changed, you got worse, you got this, what this, that. So what can you suggest, Sheryl, for people to overcome those guilt trip and not to take them too personally, which I don't know which other way they would, and make them understand that because I said no, I have self-respect, and I have self-respect for myself and not for you. So how can you, or what kind of advice would you give to be able to overcome those guilt trips?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that's on the other person. You know, you said you can't not take it personally. I think eventually, once we build up these muscles, we can not take it personally. You know, it becomes I see that you have an issue with this, and that's okay. There was a great line in Young Sheldon. He said to his grandmother, you know, I'm very upset that you won't take me somewhere, or whatever it was. And she turned around and said, I'm okay with that. And it was just this beautiful moment of boundary setting where that's okay. It's okay for us to feel that discomfort of, you don't like what I said. It doesn't mean that I have to change it to make us both comfortable, because wouldn't it be better to deal with the 5 minutes of discomfort, whatever it is, to get past that moment, than to agree to whatever is being asked of you. And now you're pretty much uncomfortable permanently.
Yes.
So, you know, it's 5 minutes of discomfort and a lifetime of happiness.
That is so true. And then also avoid them to become, entitled about it.
Yes.
Because if you don't know how to say no, then they become entitled of your life, entitled of all your action, behaviors, hopes, dreams, etc. So no one is winning there. No one at all. So, but okay, so what really drove you to write that book? Is it mostly an autobiography in some sort, or is it just a combination of situation or scenarios that you've lived through yourself and others?
Yeah, it's not an autobiography. I do definitely draw on my experience, and those people around me. I will say that kind of the impetus to begin was, as I mentioned, I was working in animal rescue, and 13, 14 years of that. I went full time right during COVID because of financial reasons, because obviously everybody's business kind of went out the door when COVID happened. And I'm working these, 16-hour days. I'm not making enough to keep a roof over my head. Rescue does not pay a lot. I'm taking care of my parents who are getting older and needing more from me. I'm still serving on boards and volunteering and doing all of these other things. And my clients started coming back.
Okay.
And I had to take them because I wasn't making enough to live.
Yes.
So, I had this 3-4 month period where it was like downward spiral. And I was crying constantly. I was short with people. I couldn't sleep. I really got to the point where I couldn't function. And one day I was just driving down the road and I saw oncoming headlights. And I had this brief thought of, if I crossed over the median, I could end it like that. Scared the crap out of me. Even I went through a clinical depression in my late 20s. And even then I wasn't suicidal. Okay. So the fact that I was at this point, I knew this was break point, and I cleared my plate. all non-essential things got removed from my plate. I took a month off from the rescue and ultimately ended up not going back. And I took that time just as a mental health, vacation, whatever you want to call that. But after a few months, I started seeing things piled back on my plate. And I couldn't figure out what was happening, but I was saying yes to all the opportunities. And the straw that broke our poor little camel friend, a friend of mine asked me to be the incoming president for our local speakers association. And I knew the answer was no. I knew it was a terrible plan. My parents were now needing more of me. I had met my now husband and was planning a wedding. I was trying to build my business back up. There were so many reasons why I should have said no, but I didn't want to disappoint my friend. And I gave her the yes.
Okay.
And instantly it was every cell in my body was like, oh, what did you do? So I was sitting on a plane a few weeks later and, really going through this decision. I had consulted mentors and a therapist and all of these people. And sitting on that plane, I was like, I don't have boundaries. Like I had read something on them and I'm like, oh, these seem important. And while I was sitting on the plane, I just outlined the book with, whatever information I had or knew I needed to get. And 6 months later, I had interviewed people with good boundaries. I'd done all the research I could do. I had 3 therapists read it because I do not have a clinical psychology degree. I have a forensic psychology degree, and I didn't want to lead anybody down the wrong path. And everybody gave the thumbs up. So yes, it has my experiences in there, and mostly from a here's what not to do. I tried this, it didn't work, don't do that. And then it's the what you actually should do information. Yeah.
And where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon. So if you type in "You Had Me at No" and Sheryl Green, you'll find it, or you can go to my website, which is Sheryl Green Speaks. There is also a coloring book that you can get with it, because who doesn't like to color? And the journal that is on Amazon is not mine. Do not buy that. That is AI. Don't get that. So book, coloring book, A-okay.
And do you offer some sort of consultation to people, or what do you do in terms of that?
Yeah, so I do boundary breakthrough calls. And you can schedule that through my website. Those are free. Usually we spend about 45 minutes just tackling what's up and how can we help you get through that. And you can also download a free how to say no cheat sheet on my website.
Beautiful, Sheryl. Well, on that note, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 23 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Establishing respectful boundaries is key to maintaining balance and avoiding burnout. It's essential to communicate your limits clearly and kindly, ensuring that others understand your needs. Prioritizing self-care by setting aside time for rest and activity that recharge you. Remember, it's okay to say no. Protecting your well-being is a priority. Boundaries aren't walls, but guidelines that create a healthy relationship and a sustainable work-life balance. By respecting your limits, you foster an environment of mutual respect and understanding. Take the time to listen to yourself and honor what you need to thrive. My name is drdanamzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.